The case of Mike transcript. Michael, Dr. Michael Yapko. Mike, client. Mike has experienced experiential gaps, realised he's been carrying a lot of emotional baggage which affects him daily, external locus of control. He believes he can't break free and he's constantly reminded of past events. Michael asks for explanation on emotional baggage to pinpoint the meaning of Mike's reference and how it was created. Cognitive distortion in Mike's answer, a lot of it is from the last 30 to 40 years of my life, one bad thing after another. His thought is not reality as he is 34 years old. He has excessive self-referencing and his outcome is global attribution to his whole life and was abused physically and verbally and ran to get away from foster homes. Mike's very associated with past trauma. Michael validates Mike's past as a nasty background. How does it affect the choices you're making today? This strategic question allows Mike to explore the experiential gaps of how he allows his past to determine his present choices on thinking behaviours that he has learned cognitive thinking. Establishes the link Mike makes between the past and the present. Mike, a lot of the time I second guess myself all the time. All or nothing thinking. He second guesses himself all the time. Mike has uncertainty and not sure exactly which way to move, replaying things in his head, stuck in the gutter, as he describes. He has a negative expectancy. Michael, stuck in terms of your why ability to do what. Questions the term stuck to find resources to replace why the ability to choose and reframe the future of what he should do to gain ability. Mike, function a lot of the time weighs me down. Description used to define stuck. It affects his family, wife, children, which then affects them. Due to Mike's behaviour, he sees his behaviour affects the family, and also a realisation there is an emotional distance. He feels personal responsibility to those around him because of his thought process, which affects his emotions and behaviour. Michael, how past experiences become a basis for emotional distance in your family. Michael strategically questions a link between the past and the present, which also is used for reframing the belief that past will not determine your emotional distance from your family in the present. Michael recognises the emotional focus Mike has and creates then the physical distance from Mike to his family. Mike, in talking to people or things, could be facial expressions that people make, like pictures, click when that happens, and other words. Mike then, for a long time after, at home, he's in another world, just thinking. Mike describes his experience of the world and the people around him like pictures reminding him of the experience over and over to second guess the situation. Ruminating is in another world he has created mentally. He internalises experience with others and the world around him. He requires dissociation. Michael, screaming about it, thinking about it. Michael repeats Mike's use of the word thinking about it to speak in Mike's language, looking for agreement. Mike, a little of both, always thinking, maybe I should have done this better, different, second-guessing himself, and he should do things in certain ways but can't decide which way to do them. Another cognitive distortion. Michael, so when you say those kinds of things to yourself, what then what happens? Michael asking Mike to look for results in his thinking, patterns, and processing outcome. Mike, I get caught up in it. Mike answers with realisation he gets caught up in his patterning and thought process. Michael has established that Mike internalises his feelings, uses the word feel that, and that he has running commentaries, thoughts, processing, evaluations on himself, and asking how he does that and what he says and does and pays attention to, which is a hypnotic language, an embedded command to use strategically. He questions. Mike, a lot of the time, I shouldn't say 100%, a lot of the times, he has traits of over-analysis and self-referencing. Michael, how do you know whether it's worth listening to? The psychoeducational piece, to question the value of thoughts and negative self-analysis. Mike, I don't. Realisation to bring about an external focus. Michael, ever had experience discovering that some things run through the mind aren't helpful? You don't need to focus on them. Michael strategically questions Mike to experience, discover, promotes choice, then loads up embedded commands that some things aren't helpful and you don't need to focus on them. Mike, there's been times what somebody says doesn't mount to all that. In Michael's embedded command, Mike agrees that things people say aren't worth the previously perceived analysis. Michael, then you let it go. Michael influences the answer. Mike, sometimes I do. Just seems that words can hurt like punches. Mike has trouble making distinctions, what's personal and what personally affects him. That is his experiential gap. Michael, if I criticise you, how do you know whether to pay attention to it, listen to it, take it seriously or dismiss it? The reason Michael questions criticism and how he pay attention to it, listen to it, take it seriously, is he has established his process of thought cognitive distortions and verbalised them to externally focus and not internalise the emotion to break the pattern he has been running in his mind. Mike, I take a lot of things seriously. Just joking I can take seriously. Mike is aware of his taking most things seriously, and even jokes are thought to be serious. He is still internalising and referencing the external situations. Michael, how do you know whether you should take it seriously? Your feelings telling me you do take it seriously. How do you know whether you should? The question is, how do you know? You should know you do take it serious. How do you know whether you should? Michael is addressing the cognitive distortion, asking Mike to check the validity of his thoughts and assessments to the external conversations and his thought process. Mike, I don't know. Mike recognises he can't make the distinction what to take seriously and what not to take seriously. Michael, really valuable to have some internal mechanism. Help decide what's worth paying attention to. And then indirectly suggests, I don't know about the inner voices that other people have in their heads, where they replay bad things and bad criticism, all the junk that goes on. To do what I do, I have hundreds of people who among you has good self-esteem. Some hens go up. I ask, do you have an inner critic? Do you have a voice in your head that criticizes you, says rotten things and puts you down, says mean, horrible things? Every single one says yes. Michael then explains why in a hypnotic language and referencing to the language used by Mike to strategically and psychoeducate Mike the value of having an internal mechanism to help him decide what's worth paying attention to, seemingly giving Mike choice. Michael then describes how others have a critical voice, that just like Mike has replayed negative criticism in their heads, he has hundreds of people he works with, which allows Mike not to feel unique, but no different to others, and to have a sense of belonging and not isolation in feelings. Also helps Michael to prove himself to Mike as an experienced therapist. Every single one who puts their hands up says yes, makes Mike feel validated for thinking this way. If you have a critical voice that says rotten things, how can you have good self-esteem? They don't listen to it. How do you not listen to it? Started learning all different kinds of strategies. I picture it as being a volume knob, and I just turn the volume down. Picture it as a barking dog tied to a tree. I just keep walking. I have another voice that says good things to me. Michael uses other people to show Mike he is not exclusively suffering his past by the voice of rotten things. He suggests strategically how can you have a good self-esteem with rotten voices, asking Mike to question himself, and how do you not listen to it? Again, asking Mike to question himself, but in saying, do you not, suggests not to listen, which is embedded commands. He then strategically targets psychoeducation. When I started learning all kinds of different strategies, giving Mike building resources to learn by suggestion, then using metaphors and distortions to dissociate him from the picture and the movie he's created and related to past experiences. The volume knob, the dog barking tied to a tree. Keep walking then, have the voice that is positive. Every single person has an inner critic, that critical voice, whether they listen to it or not. It's a very powerful being around others, asking those kinds of questions to thousands of people. But you will notice the question I ask you. Do you have a mechanism whereby you don't have to listen to it or decide it's not often valuable? It's keeping you stuck in the gutter, as you said. When is it ever going to say anything other than negative stuff? Again, Michael gives Mike the generalisation everyone has an inner critic, then gives the choice to listen to it or not. Very powerful learning. He can also learn like thousands of others have. The question I ask you, do you have a mechanism? It's a direct command. You don't have to listen to it, so decide it's not often valuable. Uses Mike's metaphor, keeping him stuck in the gutter, and questions, is it ever going to say anything other than negative stuff? He uses sarcasm to discount the over-positive expectation, to focus a more realistic idea of what people who feel good about themselves do. I'm giving you a target to aim for. Directly suggests Mike has the ability to develop a mechanism for an embedded command for not listening to it. No, it's taking you away from the place you really don't want to go. The question is strategic. Are you ever going to escape all the triggers, the sounds, the smells, the images, covering all the sensory internal feelings? And he describes it then as external, pictures, images, movies, but to negotiate in his mind to change the external world. Strategically questions, have you ever evaluated the value of thinking the things you tell yourself? Ever had options to not pay attention to it, which is an embedded command? Mike admits trying lots of times, remembers it always comes back. Mike now refers to as it, its external locus of control. Michael, it will validates Mike's answer. How will you respond to it when you have the memories, the images? A bad memory that's happened to you, you can focus or not focus. I'd like to hear about times you do either. The times you do focus, tell me what happens, and the time you don't, what happens. Michael asks, how is it different in different ways of determining the what to do, focus on or not? Mike, I focus on bad things. I escape from it. I feel it build up. A lot of the times at work, sometimes I have to get out real quick. I just seem to cry for a long time. That's how I just vent it out. I is self-referencing, self-directed. He trusts Michael to disclose his actions, crying a long time. The good times when people say things, you try to prove them wrong. Example, he makes the good bad as well, as his patterning is strong held, then describes it as a magnet. Bad sticks on you. It's hard to get away from it. I try to tell myself, no, it's not truly bad. It's hard, not easy to say, I'll forget it. It's not right. He does try to fight the pictures, but still relates to being stuck and fights hard. Michael validates Mike. It's not easy, which is a validation, but it's a skill worth developing. You will have things thrown at you the rest of your life. Get good at dodging and weaving around them, not be the magnet. Michael strategically suggests it's not easy, but developing a skill to bring about change. Uses a metaphor, not be the magnet, to use the option. Have you done focus work, hypnotic work, imagery work? Michael has already had Mike imagining all along the interview, yet he is not aware of the work he's already done in this session. Mike, no, he's unaware of the imagery work already done in this session. Michael, would be very interesting way to get absorbed in a different way, a style of thought about these kinds of things. If you're actually open to doing that kind of session, I'd love to do that with you. There is a load of embedded commands to get Mike to participate with Michael's ideas of imagery. He also uses the context to make him very interested, using thoughts, images of interest. Mike, okay. So he agrees easily due to the rapport built by Michael and the way he has made it and described it in a way that flows easily. Michael asks again to fully run with the idea. Mike, yeah. Michael is preparing for the pre-hypnosis tasking before he applies. He is presupposing and suggesting what's the plan at task is. Some different ideas, different possibilities. Isn't anything you have to do. As you're listening to me, start to get more absorbed in the things we are talking about. I'll start to open some different possibilities for you in different ways of responding. It's not the world that's going to change. It's going to be your internal experience, how you respond to these things. Pointing out change has to occur in him, that the world will not change, but his view of the world can. Mike, okay, Mike has agreed and has accepted the task. Michael. Hypnotic induction begins with the comfort and the idea of focusing and presupposition. Mike. All right. Michael. Hypnotic suggestion asked to let his eyes close, a few deep breaths, to warm up to the next couple of minutes, to the notion of absorbing yourself in a different way of thinking about your own experience. Michael instructs Mike to take charge of his own experience that allows his imagination to work on a thought patterning not used in the past. The hypnotic suggestion to think about past way of absorbing negative feelings, then also suggests that those feelings have gone to get absorbed, that you really don't see others' ways of thinking and feelings of negativity are no longer there. Michael mentions how valuable just to sit quietly the way he is now, and how freeing it is to explore other parts of himself, recreating the thought pattern of still and quiet as opposed to negative and rumination and self-criticism. Then the hypnotic language commands, you're much more than your past. Suggestion of a reprogramming sentence, being much more than your past, is going to surface at different times, different places. I encourage you to start thinking differently about himself and his experience, to explore within himself, exploring as a metaphor to discover the new ways he hasn't been processing thoughts in the past regarding the negative judgments of his previous process. Utilising his strengths he uses in the past to cope, he's used to build a different life for himself. He is suggesting a different life to what he has had previously, to dissociate the past from the present for himself. His strengths, his marriage, family, things he has left behind in the past to create a closeness. As Mike has said, he wants to have less distance to his family. Michael asks Mike to step outside of his usual experience of himself, that several things are especially important, suggesting he is to step aside of himself, to watch his experience from the outside, not internally. Then he is to look at his internal experience and that it is changeable, asking him to relax into and using deepening methods to the trance, and suggest he's building momentum and discovers himself in a place of things feeling really good, situations, memories he's forgotten that were nice, that he can't see outside his past negative experience, that there were moments, but they were buried in the same trauma of life he depicts. People he's met that went out of their way to do something nice. The reality, you're more than your past, again dissociating Mike from his negative past, drifting into his awareness of this. Suggests goal orientation, to want the future to be different than the past. Wants to connect with his wife and kids. Ways to evolve friendships through things he says to himself positively. Through thoughts, make the difference. Mind is capable of generating different things. Audio clips. Mike's pictures he referred to as negative video clips of different experiences, reframing the past images and thought patterns. The hypnotic language of comfortable state, to realise things just drift off past, to not overthink it but relax into the process. It never really sticks to you. Using Mike's words are the strongest form of voice to break the pattern of the past beliefs. Reframing as things can just float by that you never latch onto or give time to. The voices of everyone can go quiet. They can become easy to ignore. And then he is not specific, so Mike can determine the choice of experience. He can take over certain aspects, giving him power over himself. Things he has done he wouldn't have predicted from his past, reminding Mike of his predicted past, and to appreciate that on impersonal and personal levels. A storytelling piece. Nobody would have predicted the future. Space shuttles, space stations, things changed. Paved roads were not predicted. Paved roads are everywhere, or flying around the world in hours. Reframing. Use your past to predict the future. It is difficult to fill the future with more things that remind you you're more than that. Suggest the future is choice-driven. Hypnotic suggestion to build a barrier between the past and the present offers dissociation from the negative past. A wall built between what you're experiencing now and what you'll experience tomorrow, what you experienced before. Use the actual image of a wall to separate the past from the present and the present from the future. Then Michael offers Mike to use his own imagery sense to create the use of some other divider. The things that have gone before have less and less influence on choices made today, tomorrow, and all of your tomorrows. A deepener technique used to focus on breathing and muscle tone absorb comfort. You can go in yourself and find experiences, simple pleasures, visualization of the looks of your children's faces to do something funny and unexpected. Mike to focus on pleasant visions of his children, replacing feelings of distance and fun instead of expected sadness on children's expressions. Michael uses words like extraordinary and range of feelings to place positive expectancy and your capability to do so. Dissociation, again, build a wall around what was, reframing to create what possibilities could be endless. Repeating tasking, you're more than your past. The future hasn't happened yet. It's going to be created, not predicted. He brings awareness of shifts, feelings, thoughts, perception in a while to share and describe whilst relaxed, noticing to trust himself in the situation with Michael and himself to deal with whatever Michael might say or do is an embedded command. He states he already trusts himself to deal with spontaneity internally, and trust doesn't have to be in the world or predictability or safety, globalization of the world. Focus awareness internally, an embedded command. You can deal with it. Future orientation in hypnotic language. The best way to predict your future is to create it. And every interaction with your family, you create the opportunity to do it better. To discover himself and what's right about himself. Future family connection from changes in thought patterns. Review different suggestions and reactions that he can take from the experience and use to respond differently to past voices. Metaphor, turning down the volume. Picture of a dog barking tied to a tree, just walking past it. You don't have to listen to what isn't useful. It's a submodality shift used. You can address the critical voice by not listening to it if it isn't useful. It allows time for Mike to process thoughts, feelings, reactions, consolidate, absorb deeper implications until he feels ready to start reorientation and reconnecting when he's ready to open his eyes before bringing him back. Checking in asks Mike about this experience. Wording expresses you want to tell me about it is a direct command. Mike shared he is capable of feelings, talents and thoughts. Michael asks for specifics and general awareness. Mike replies, general. Michael questions how it felt against specific question. Mike's reply, Felt good. He could imagine things have got him down, but he is capable of standing up. Realization how capable he is and how limiting himself in everything, and how quick his processing was to people's comments in the past that aren't true. He realised how much of his influence is his children, either positive or negative, and that he has a sense of control, good or bad or neutral. Michael validates his realisation. Mike. Pivotal point realisation when Mike really focused for the minute. He is living in the past, not living in the present, not accepting things from what they are. He's gotten them already doomed before they start. So Mike he's acknowledged his barriers. Michael invalidates the importance of realisation. Mike understood the walls and chose to make his own metaphor, like doors and windows. He's allowing emotions and pictures, water coming through them, and he has to close the windows and doors, pictured being cold and getting a blanket. He found really interesting, used more than one way of visualising and creating the barriers. He can be whoever and do whatever he wants to do or be. Michael, people are going to tell you that you can't do what you want. Reframing your response will be varied, and thanking them for sharing, and to respond himself. What he says and makes happen is Mike's choice. There's no choice that people throw stuff at you. So what? Don't make it valid. Mike now sees he has a choice to listen or not, needs to take in the positive things, really process what others say. He can draw encouragement of it. As previous, he analysed it as all criticism. He had made the discovery, as asked by hypnotic intervention by Michael, he can't get over it, that he never took 5 minutes to just relax. He walks around stressed out and he can't determine the time he has taken to just feel a breath and relax. Michael observes and ratifies his body and face to the new state of being relaxed. Points out that the importance of spending time with himself in a way where he likes what's in there, and the relaxed Mike. Go inside and say there's good stuff in thoughts. It doesn't matter what goes on externally, but what's rejuvenating, replenishing. What highlights for Mike the range of things he's capable of, and to use the range rather than limiting on one narrow band. Michael goes after the cognitive behaviour to change the patterning and just reloads the changes required by Mike. Mike, agrees to the loading. Michael, he's agreeing to agree, again repeating the process so as to be on the same track. Mike remembers seeing on TV once someone took a paper and put a little dot and said, "What did you see?" It focused on the little dot, referring that things can be looked at as small. Even looking at a paper, just focus on the small of it all and don't make things bigger than they seem. Michael, it's about perception. Mike had now learned it's an experience, the first time focusing imagery work he's done well, and asks him if he would pursue with interest. Mike, yes, agrees. Michael reinforces a skill to learn and develop ways of doing that. Michael suggests the counselling work he's doing can build on this skill through tapes on relaxation and visualisation, that they are beneficial to developing his own ability to sit down and de-stress and change his behaviour towards his family and time calming down, then felt great and showed it and highlighting it over and over. Reward by self-talk. I'm good. I can do these things. He's past whatever he was before. It's important. Mike agrees, yeah. Michael replies, that's good. Mike replies, feels real good. Michael, that's good, agrees. Mike, I need to step outside of what he's in. Dissociated learned skill by Mike after discussion with Michael. Michael, always makes important note to step outside. The importance is highlighted by repeating always. Will be lasting thing from the session. Anything that floats through your brain is not worth airtime until you decide it is. The brain is capable of creating junk, as Michael self-references himself, then puts it back to Mike in his language and saying, you know, a lot of things flow through my mind, gold, and every insight is meaningful. Every perception is worth following up. Michael keeps going back and forth, using himself as an example of learning, putting himself in Mike's shoes and comparison to help him relate. They are an equal playing field. For Mike previously hasn't had the discrimination strategy or the ability to decide it is worth focusing on or not. He had autonomous thinking and talking inwardly and responding to imagine being very busy, stressful, trying to keep up with and sorting and living with it. His past processing pattern. Mike, it is. So Mike agrees. Michael, choice filter is now activated. A bunch of stuff, spending time with himself in a comfortable way, loading up little things, smiles, touch, sunsets, small stuff that makes life good overall. Mike, it is good because it's a small stuff is good to Mike. Michael points out it's not always the case to not build up failure and perception. When crummy things do happen, they are going to happen, and good is going to happen also. Looking at life more balanced as to only crappy. Mike agrees, yeah. Michael, sounds like you got some good thing going. Mike agrees, I do. Michael, yes, it sounds. Mike, I do. Michael, enjoy it. Mike responds, I will. Michael, the close and thanks.